Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to our webinar today, Decoding Conversation Intelligence, How to Ignite Your Sales Cycle. We're going to go ahead and kick things off shortly with today's experts, but first, I just wanted to cover off on some housekeeping items. ZoomInfo is a publicly traded company. This presentation may contain forward-looking statements. Any buying decision you make should be based only upon currently available products and offerings. Our complete safe harbor statement is displayed here for your review. All right. And with that, I wanted to go ahead and welcome Kelly and Elise onto today's presentation. They're going to be covering off on a lot. Kelly, Elise, you want to come into the fold here? Awesome. Great. How are you guys today? It's nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. Kelly, let's go ahead and kick things off with you. Just a little intro about yourself. Any fun facts?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been with Chorus since December of 2020, became part of ZoomInfo with the acquisition that happened in July of 2021. My initial role was selling Chorus into the mid-market customers of ZoomInfo. And then most recently, as of October 2022, I took over as manager for the Chorus team.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And Elise, how about you?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Elise Thibodeau. I'm the Director of Customer Success for both Chorus and Engage. I've also been with the Chorus business a fairly long time, since 2018. Originally joined the business as their first strategic CSM, and now lead that organization. I'm based in San Francisco, but if you can tell from my last name, I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and excited to be here.
Great. Well, thank you both for popping on and introducing yourself. I wanted to provide sort of a quick refresher as to why everyone registered and is here and what they want to learn about. So today, Elise and Kelly are going to cover off on, how to stay ahead of these trends and advances in conversation intelligence, how to identify these sales risks and revive some of those stalled opportunities, navigate those complex deal cycles. They're getting larger and longer with more people involved in the purchasing decision, how to transform those prospect and customer insights into actual actionable steps forward for either your sales or your customer success teams. Also, conversation intelligence is just one piece of the puzzle. And so how should it kind of work with the other bits and pieces of your already existing tech stack? They'll also cover off on some practical use cases with conversation intelligence with a few anecdotes of their own. And lastly, they'll kind of shed light on some best tips and practices for maintaining and adopting conversation intelligence. All right, so we have a quick poll for the audience. We wanted to just get a feel for how familiar everyone today is with conversation intelligence and how does it sort of, relate to your role. So you should see that on your On24 console screen. So I'll go ahead and give the audience a sec to answer that question there. And Kelly, Elise, any thoughts on any of these responses or which one you think might be the top one?
I think most people would be somewhat familiar, I would hope, but I think people would be surprised maybe if they don't think it's applicable to them, that it actually is. So I think that's something that we can, Elise and I can dive into more today as to how this really touches every piece and function within an organization.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and push the results here. So it looks like the bulk of people on today's session are either not really familiar with it, it's kind of a newer concept for them and what the applications are. And then there's the other big portion are somewhat familiar. So they kind of know what it is, but they haven't really fully explored its potential and what it can help them do for their teams. So really great insights there. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to move forward here. So just kind of lay of the land, right? Getting a definition around conversation intelligence. So Elise, in a few words, a few sentences, how do you look at and define conversation intelligence, as it relates to your role as well?
Yeah, it's a good question, and one you can imagine I've been asked a lot since I've been with Chorus since 2018. And the tried and true answer that I've always used, and I'm going to spoiler alert, I'm going to caveat it with the 2023 version of the answer, is that conversation intelligence is a way to record, transcribe, and analyze your customer-facing conversations, right? To capture the voice of the customer. The 2023 edit I'd provide to that is that in addition to recording, transcribing, and analyzing, it's also informing how we act, and in some ways it's acting for us. I think now more than ever, we're being asked to do more with less. And I think conversation intelligence is a tool that you can use to also inform how you act on the voice of the customer.
Awesome. Great. Kelly, any additional thoughts to add to what Elise was just mentioning? Specifically, like those three key pillars she just called out with record, analyze, transcribe, and act?
Yeah, I think to Elise's point, that act piece is really important as far as, we're going to be here to record. We're going to join any of your web conferencing or phone calls, transcribing it so that you have a frame of reference to go back and not have to listen to a call in its entirety, analyzing it. So we'll index it based off of what topics were touched on or discussed. But then what do we do after that once we have all of that done for us is using that information to then act, whether it's helping it to make data-backed decisions, understanding the voice of the customer more, or understanding the scope of any potential opportunities or pipeline that are in play. Great.
Awesome. So now that we kind of have, this foundation for conversation intelligence and how you both sort of look at it and define it, we're going to go ahead and dive into, some key features, the benefits around it. So Kelly, I'll kick this one off with you. In your role, what are some of the key features of conversation intelligence that you found like most important for the sales side? Like what stands out for you?
Absolutely. I think the deal intelligence piece is what really stands out. I think when you think historically of even how a sales cycle starts is, you find the person you want to talk to, and then you have the conversation. What happens in that conversation was historically the black box within that sales cycle. So relying on what reps would put back into your CRM, which, let's be honest, reps aren't great at putting information back into their CRM. I can call them out. I used to be a rep. I was that rep, right? And so now with the use of conversation intelligence, we can really understand that objective truth as to what's happening within that sales cycle. So the deal intelligence of who are we working with, what are their use cases? Is there potential risk that's occurring in this opportunity that maybe historically we wouldn't have had that insight to through the use of our trackers. So being able to index what's happening and having those moments proactively surfaced to me as a manager. My team was 7 people. I can't be on every single conversation. So being able to be alerted when things are happening within conversations that can help me either get the deal to closed won, give me insight into maybe why it was closed lost, really being able to uncover what's happening objectively within those opportunities that we're calling that are going to close for this month or this quarter, really just giving us that unbiased truth into our open pipeline.
Great. You touched on something that I think we'll cover off on later, but the fact that, as a manager, you can't be on every single call. And so this has really helped you as a leader, like empower your teams is kind of what I'm hearing from that. So that's another great point. So thank you for kind of diving into that piece as well. Elise, also like from your perspective, how is conversation intelligence, unique to your role and customer success side of the sales cycle?
Yeah, so as a customer success org and as a post-sale org more broadly, we're always thinking about 2 big things, right? So the first is how do we retain and grow our existing client base? Obviously, that's top of mind for every CS leader. But second, and something that feeds into the first, is creating delightful customer experiences. So as those 2 things relate to conversation intelligence, I think something that's extremely critical to both of those is to create continuity across the entire customer experience by having access to every single call and email that you have with the customer. I think customer success, the charter of our entire org, is to be the steward of that relationship, right? We have to preserve everything that's happened. We need to maintain it. We need to be, you always hear you're the quarterback between teams, right? So our responsibility is to ensure everything that was promised at every point of the journey is delivered on. So whether that's, for example, success criteria that are communicated with Kelly's org at the top of the sales cycle, right? In the second call, they communicate what they need to do with our product. It's essential that our team doesn't lose that moment and that we have access to it. Whether that's feature requests or feedback that we think are critical to unlocking growth in another part of the org. Conversation intelligence is our critical tool to be able to capture that, easily search it, and easily share it with the people that impact the customers. So whether that's our product team, our marketing team, our support team, we are the person who is channeling that voice of the customer to everyone involved to make sure that we hit those two goals, right? To make sure that we retain and grow and provide delightful customer experiences. I think a feature that I'm really excited about that I'm sure both Kelly and myself will touch on throughout this conversation is the role that AI plays in that. Chorus has always been an AI product, but obviously generative AI has changed the game. And so I know we're both excited to share how that's also changing how we run the business and leverage Chorus.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely, I'm really looking forward to touching on that AI side. What I hear from both of you right now is, like, conversation intelligence is sort of, it's applicable as a full circle, right? It's not just limited to one department here. So I love how, Elise, you touched on getting those insights throughout the sales process so that that helps feed like your team's responsibilities in terms of onboarding. And then even if it's capturing like objections maybe that the prospect might have had initially to begin with, if there's a renewal coming up, it sounds like you guys kind of have these insights on what they might already push back on and kind of have this idea and this playbook around how to, communicate with them and get them on board for renewing and stuff like that. So I love how you guys kind of explained how it comes full circle for both of your departments and teams there. I wanted to dive in though. We touched on this AI side. Generative AI, I'm sure, is not a new term for folks on today's session. It is everywhere. I swear I see like 5 articles all over my LinkedIn on a daily basis. But it's, a lot of companies are trying to find out where generative AI could fit into their existing tech or SaaS or product. So Kelly, I sort of wanted to start with you. What is generative AI? Where is that coming into play for you with conversation intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most recently with our meeting summaries that we released, after every meeting that a rep on my team has, we're able to produce these recaps essentially with 10 bullet points of what was discussed on this call. And it's eerily accurate, as if this person was in the room and just quickly summarized it and popped it out. Where that helps me as a manager is that summary is sent to me in Slack, so I can see what happened on this call, get the bullet points of what was touched on, what were the action items. So is it that we're having a next call, we need to follow up with XYZ, whatever that may be. That's also pushed in the form of an email. It's also pushed into Salesforce. And then in Chorus itself, when you go to review that individual call itself. So for myself, if I want to go in and see how a call went, I don't have to listen to an hour and a half. I can see essentially the too long didn't read of what happened on this call. And is this a call that is worth my time to either coach? Are there risks that's happening on this opportunity? It gives me that objective truth as to how did a conversation go and what do our next action items need to be, and how can I act on this information now? That also helps for a multitude of reasons across a lot of different departments. If I want to share this call with maybe someone on our product team, if it was really product heavy, or maybe it was a great example of behavior that we want to emulate across the entire org or across my team, I can send that, I can put it into a playlist, and then my team can, again, get that same view that I have, jumping to those specific parts of a conversation without having to listen to it its entirety, so that they can get the most out of it in the least amount of time to then start implementing that into their own day-to-day.
Great. And I want to ask off of that, you're saying, what I love is that you're saying conversation intelligence is a great way to see the objective truth. And I think that's really important, especially like hearing from sellers, like it's the fact of the matter. It's what actually was said on the call. It wasn't a feeling. And so I like how you kind of touched on that it helps give you a more like zoned in like perspective on how it actually went. But did you have any examples of essentially like what things you would look for in terms of what was a successful sort of outcome versus for a call versus a not successful outcome, and like how that played a role in how you moved forward, maybe like repeating that?
I think the big things that I look for when reviewing calls or when I get these summaries are, what are our next steps, right? Are we progressing that sales cycle? Are we actively moving it forward? And are there potential risk in there that is being surfaced through the use of our AI? So I think with sellers, especially just humans, everyone on this webinar could leave and have a different interpretation of how it went. So having that objective truth coming through those alerts through our risk tracker, alerting me to things that might have been said outside of what my rep is telling me happened on this call. Those are moments that I'm looking for to understand, is this a real risk that is something that I need to get involved in? Maybe we need to loop in someone from the C-suite to help address any concerns. I think that's the beauty of the risk tracker that we have, is it's one of our trackers that comes out of the box. And so for people that aren't familiar with the word trackers, think of that as synonymous with topics that were discussed. And so risk is one that comes out of the box. So we have 4 to 5 pages worth of what could a risk sound like, whether it's around uncertainty, timeline, competitors, anything like that. So it helps me, especially for some of my reps that might be greener to sales, what they might get happy ears, right? They hear, oh, I'm ready to move forward, but then they didn't ask that follow-up question of, well, when are you ready to move forward? So it helps just really gain a full understanding directly from the customer's mouth as to what maybe boxes are left unchecked that we need to help identify or kind of just check off in order to help continue the sales cycle.
Awesome. Elise, any similar use case on your end before we move forward in terms of how your team has kind of used that?
I think for the generative AI component specifically, I think another powerful thing about this is, as you think about making efficient processes and collaborative models in your teams. So Kelly mentioned this kind of voice of truth, this objective reality of a call being summarized very quickly after the call being pushed to Slack. That's also going to places like Salesforce. For the case like myself, it's also going to places like Gainsight. So our teams are kind of a nexus. The customer success team is a nexus of the entire account, right? But we have, minimum 5 different people supporting this account. So a really awesome thing that these things can do is immediately divert these generative AI summaries into a channel where the entire account team lives. So it saves a CSM. It seems small, right? But assume after every single conversation someone has with a customer, they're taking 5 to 10 minutes to unpack what was said, to summarize it, to produce next steps, right? It's 5 minutes, but maybe they have 5 calls a day and they have 25 of those in a week. It's a lot of time, right? So the ability to just have those auto push to a Slack channel where the team's already at while the CSM is already on their next call and the account team can start kind of unpacking what was said is such a win from both an efficiency perspective as well as just a collaborative perspective and moving fast on a deal.
Yeah, definitely that accelerating the sales cycle side of things for sure. Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and like jump into this next part here. I think you guys sort of already teed it up a bit, but navigating these complex deal cycle and these buying committees that are ever expanding, it feels like. I know sales cycles are also lengthening, and so that's kind of a pain point right now on the sales side of things. At least I'll be curious to hear sort of what you're seeing. But Kelly, I wanted to kick this one over to you first. What are some of those challenges that you're seeing from the sales org perspective right now?
I think given the macroeconomic climate that we find ourselves in, some of the key themes that we're seeing with the customers and prospects that we're speaking with are the themes of doing more with less, but also doing more with what you currently have. So really, what makes our top sellers that we have the best, and how can we start to replicate that behavior across the entire team without having to either add more headcount? Also being able to help reps be more successful by leveraging that voice of the customer, taking that direct, what we call snippet of the call, sending it to the product team, the marketing team, whether we're getting new competitive intel as to are our competitors doing something that we aren't, so that we can use that to alter maybe collateral, come out with a new battle card, a new white paper, whatever that may be. But really just being able to leverage what you have in place today with the people that you have in place today by uncovering what's happening in the conversations to then act on that information.
Great. So I wanted to then, kick this over to Elise. In the same vein, what are the challenges from your perspective, and how is conversation intelligence sort of helping power and helping your team sort of navigate around those obstacles?
Yeah, so when I think about the role that customer success plays in a complex deal cycle for us, whether that's a renewal or an upsell and things like buying committees, my mind goes straight to the importance of multi-threading in our customer base, right? We've always harped on every CSM in our org for doing this. Like, the surest way to lose a deal is to have one person in the org who you speak with, right? So I think that's even more important now. As Kelly mentioned, the market is super volatile, and it's a huge mistake to only be engaging with one person in an account. And we're finding it more critical than ever to ensure that we have penetration in every part of the business, right? When we're talking about our products. So as I relate that back to conversation intelligence and to Chorus, I think of two features that I think are critical to our ability to track and enforce this. So the first is a multi-threading dashboard that's available in our analytics suite, which essentially tells us on average how many people are our CSMs touching in each of their accounts. So I can literally see a stack ranked list of every CSM in my org, who's hitting on average 7 people in that account, who's hitting on average 2. We expect some variability there depending on your segment, right? So strat or enterprise accounts will behave differently than SMB, but it's extremely telling on where we have some strengths on the team and where we have some opportunities, right? And so we can use that data to drive coaching plans, to drive enablement plans, to lift up the people who are doing that well. So that's one way that we do this and think about this. The second is by using contact data in our deals board, which you can access in Chorus, you can access it in Salesforce or your CRM, which essentially tells us in every part of our business, whether it's someone on our sales team, our product team, our marketing team, our leadership team, who are we talking to in this organization? What's their level? How engaged are they with us? And what are they talking about, right? So if a CSM on my team is having trouble getting in touch with someone, I can go into Chorus and understand, who is Kelly's team having success talking with? Who is the product marketing team talking to about a case study? And since it's not just a list of the emails, it's also searchable. I can also see trends. I can see, what are we talking to those people about? How often are we talking to those people? Who's most likely to reply? So our CSMs are choosing in a wise way who to engage with, right? They're not just throwing emails out to every user in an account, right? They know who they're likely to have most success with. When we give them the advice, you're single threaded in this account and you have to multi-thread. And that's a real big unlock, of course, for us.
Awesome. I think both of you kind of touched on this piece where it's like finding what works and like rinsing and repeating that across the individuals on your team. And that kind of plays into, what Kelly was touching on, doing more with what you already have. So that was a great, thank you for answering that in a very holistic way so people kind of understand how it all kind of like pieces together. I wanted to ask Kelly, previously you had mentioned how conversation intelligence can help sort of proactively address any roadblocks or objections or things that might pop up later in the sales cycle. Do you have, any insight on how conversation intelligence has helped enable your reps to kind of see that?
Yes, so I think the beauty of being part of ZoomInfo is that we have access to other types of information around buying committee, as well as things that are happening at the companies that we're working with. So if you identify who is your buying committee for your specific product or service, to Elise's point of multi-threading, we can see who we're actively working with, and then ZoomInfo can suggest contacts based off of that buying committee that you've set up, is say, hey, you're only working with this single person, you're single threaded. Based off of the buying committee that you've set up, these are a few contacts that we suggest that you should reach out to. So that helps us ensure that we're reaching out to not just other people, but the right people at those organizations, and then providing that contact information. In that same vein of understanding not just who should we be reaching out to, but also what's happening at the companies that we're actively working with that can help give us insight into maybe why a deal has stalled or just the status of the company itself. So through things like Scoops, which tells us either the financial updates or company structure updates, we can see, did a company just hire a new CFO? Did they just get a new round of funding? Any piece of information that can give us more insight into the company that we're working with. And then things like intent, are people at the company that we're working with, are they researching other tools or products or services that we can help them with? Are they looking into maybe some of our competitors? Just having that wealth of knowledge that ZoomInfo can provide can help us within that deal cycle specifically to maybe either justify or just give more context into the risk that we're hearing in the conversations itself, and being proactively alerted when that risk is identified, whether that's coming in the form of an email update. Maybe if you're like me, I have a saved view in Chorus. So when I log in every day, I can see the calls that my team has had in the past, if I want to say day, week, whatever that time frame is. And then I can have those trackers set. I want to see what is the risk that happened on every call. I want to see what the next steps are. I can set it to our competitors being mentioned, just so that I'm getting that bird's eye view as to what is happening in all of the deals that we're calling for this month or that we're calling for this quarter, so that there aren't any surprises at the last day of the month as to why something may or may not close.
Yeah, definitely. I like that because it helps alleviate any surprises I'm sure that can pop up along the way. So that's awesome that your team's been able to like really proactively address a lot of that risk like earlier on to help kind of mitigate, that that gap to close at the end of the month. I'm just keeping an eye on time right now, so we have a lot more for you guys, but we're going to keep moving forward. Both you, Kelly, and Elise have sort of touched on how does conversation intelligence work within sort of this existing tech stack environment. And so, Kelly, I wanted to pass this over to you. Like, conversation intelligence is just kind of one piece of the deal management puzzle. How can organizations really ensure that once they have a tool like conversation intelligence, they amplify, its usage?
Yeah, I think conversation intelligence can cover a lot of different things. It can do a lot of things. So I think one thing to keep in mind is to not try to boil the ocean from the day one that you start up. I think really making sure that conversation intelligence, though, it's being plugged into the systems that you're already using. I think that's the beauty of Chorus, is that we're the most connected tool on the market today. So making sure that Chorus is integrated with your CRM, with any of your web conferencing tools. If you use Slack, if you use Clary, if you use Gainsight, I think we don't want to silo the information because there is so much value in conversation intelligence itself. We want to push it into the systems that you're already using so that you aren't siloed to a singular platform. But if you're like myself, we use Salesforce. I live in Salesforce every day. That's where I'm expected to update my numbers. That's where leadership comes to see pipeline. That's where they're making their data back decisions out of. So for me to be able to leverage that voice of the customer in Salesforce is priceless. I can see the full scope of an opportunity. Have we talked about budget? Have we talked about budget specifically with the CRO? I can search for those trackers. I can search to see if any certain term has come up in that opportunity without even having to leave Salesforce. And then I can even watch those calls in Salesforce itself. So I think that the integrated experience, and that even goes back to just, doing more with what you have and doing more with less. If you can have your systems all integrated, talking the same language, talking to each other, ultimately is what's going to help minimize how much of that time your reps are spending on non-revenue generating activities so that they can focus on what matters most.
Awesome. And at least sort of on the similar wavelength there, in terms of conversation intelligence just being one piece of the puzzle, have you seen any pitfalls in terms of, like how organizations can actually successfully adopt it without, it falling through, without, ensuring that everything's connected, it's flowing through your CRM, whatever the case is there.
Yeah, I think the reason that Kelly and I were kind of editing this definition of conversation intelligence to include this word act or this perspective of action is because having access to a recorded copy of your team's conversation is actually not the end goal, right? Like, okay, so you have a library of 12,000 calls, like, so what? That's what do you do with that, right? So that's an impossible thing to be able to understand and act on, right? So one way of activating all of this data is by making sure that you set up conversation intelligence and in Chorus really well. To Kelly's point, to live where your team is already living. We find that most sellers or most CSMs do spend their time in Salesforce. So there's a lot of appetite from the business to put as much data in Salesforce as possible. And you can do that really well. I'd also urge you to be very thoughtful at the beginning, right? You want to be as strategic as you can about all the data that you can pull into Salesforce, where you want it to go. That way you can do things like build workflows on top of it and automate things based on the generative AI summaries that Chorus puts in. But a CRM aside, obviously as a customer success leader, I'm really excited about our Gainsight integration. That's where our organization lives. So something that's really important to our leadership is ensuring that in addition to things going to Salesforce, in addition to things going to Slack, Gainsight is our source of truth. So we make sure that it's not just a recording of a conversation that goes into Gainsight, right? It's a generative AI summary. It's a link to watch the call in Gainsight, and it's in a place where the rest of the organization lives. So in addition to just, there's a lot of change management involved with a tool like Chorus and things that you should do from a comms perspective, but from an integrations perspective, think about where your team lives and build Chorus to push its data there.
Awesome. Great answer. Thank you for touching on the importance of not just the technical, but also there's this people piece, right? Like conversation intelligence is only successful if your teams can adopt it and use it to their advantage. So Kelly, I wanted to kind of pass this over to you. Sometimes teams are resistant to change, new technologies. And so going off of Elisa's prior point, what have you found from a best practices perspective to, have your reps adopt conversation intelligence the best way possible?
I think it's all in how it's positioned to the team. If you come in and say, we bought this new technology so that we can watch your calls and tell you how bad of a job you guys are doing, no one's going to sign on to that, right? And so if you pivot and say, we're investing in this technology to give you more time back in your day so that you don't have to worry about taking notes on your call, you can get summaries sent directly to your inbox directly after them, really positioning about how it's going to benefit the sellers as opposed to leadership itself. Yes, there's benefits for leadership and other departments, but really showcasing the benefits for the reps themselves. I mean, I sell Chorus every day. Take it with a grain of salt. I cannot do my job without this technology. Full stop. That's how much I rely on it every single day. And so I think positioning it to the reps as to why they should care about this, but then also making it from the get-go as a place to celebrate what people are doing really well. I think salespeople are competitive by nature. So if you start highlighting who's doing what well and celebrating that, people will start to lean in more as to, I want to shout out, or, hey, I want to try that tactic that Elise tried on that call. And really just using it as a way to celebrate what people are doing well will help the team lean in and buy in more. And I think, again, conversation intelligence can cover a lot of different things. And so not having the team do too much at once. I think the crawl, walk, run approach very much makes CI more digestible, but just starting hey, this is something that's going to help make your job easier is what's going to help get that buy-in instead of positioning it from a big brother-esque type of tool.
Great. Elise, any thoughts on that? What's worked for your team, or you in full support of everything Kelly said?
I can't endorse Kelly enough. I really can't, in terms of prioritizing how you position Chorus. getting sponsorship from your top kind of revenue leader endorsing, why we're choosing conversation intelligence. I think the only other thing I'd put on the table is that I think this is a tool that benefits really strongly from a very strong partnership with a team like enablement or RevOps. I think so having a really strong communication strategy, a really strong kind of celebration strategy, a really strong coaching strategy, right? I think to the extent that you can partner early on with those folks in your team, a really strong partnership between sales and enablement will make anything better in a sales org, obviously. But I think especially for rollout of a tool like Chorus, it's critical to seeing value, and it's critical to kind of winning the hearts and minds of the field as well.
Great. Yeah, definitely in full support of making sure like the reps are enabled to have that. And we're close to time, so I wanted to quickly jump in with both of you on, let's look at some practical applications that you've seen in your careers with conversation intelligence. Maybe get the creativity flowing for the audience today. So, Kelly, I wanted to hear if you have, from a sales perspective, you've talked a lot about this ability to assess risk and kind of address it sooner rather than later. Did you have a specific anecdote that you wanted to share, maybe around how conversation intelligence helped rescue a deal that was signaling that risk?
Yes, one that comes to mind is the risk that had been flagged was no next step set, or that we hadn't sent a calendar invite, and the deal had essentially stalled. And so what we found was that the person that we had been working with had left the organization. And so we had to kind of rally around some people that we had been working with. And what we did is we went back into some of those early conversations that we had, created snippets of what the use case was, what the pain points were, why we were even having that conversation. And we sent those directly to the CEO saying, hey, we've been working with so-and-so. We recognize they're not with the organization. This is why we were speaking with them. And these were the challenges that we were looking to solve. And that completely revived the deal and helped us get it across the line and closed one. So being able to leverage what previously had been occurring in the conversation and using that main point of context, direct words. I think it's so powerful to use the words that we're getting directly from our customers back to them, because it's going to be in their own jargon, using their own words, is what's most powerful as we've seen in some, like, whether we're sending an email follow-up, trying to loop in other people and multi-threading, using those exact verbiage.
Awesome. That's a really cool use case. How did you find out that they left the organization? Did they just not return anything and you guys just kind of assumed, or?
We had set up trackers within ZoomInfo and got a notification of a job change.
Oh, nice. Very cool. See, it's all coming full circle. It all works together. Elise, kind of similarly, do you have any anecdotes or examples, that conversation intelligence has helped your team identify, any opportunities for expansion, cross-selling? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I think this can probably look a couple different ways depending on how you grow your accounts, right? So some organizations grow by adding licenses, some grow by adding products. And also varies, depends on who owns that, the commercial element of that, right? Does the CSM own it? Does the account management function own it? I'll speak to two and then you can kind of use your creative juices to solve for the other scenarios. But in a world where, for example, someone on this call has a seat-based growth model, where conversation intelligence can really come in clutch is imagine every CSM on your team having a conversation with your kind of current main point of contact, right? And that main point of contact mentions in passing their peer in another part of the business that either, number one, said they were interested in your products. That's the dream. It rarely happens that way. Or number two, mentioned a pain point that you know that your product solves for. Imagine your CSM live on the Zoom call using a feature like our Zoom app can literally open up Zoom Chorus inside of Zoom, mention their account manager and say, hey, it sounds like we might be able to get a warm intro to this part of the org from Sally, something for us to chat on later. press enter, that AM will get an immediate notification that a CSM's live on a call has identified a potential upsell opportunity, and within 30 minutes can get an email out the door, right? There's no need to move that fast, but I'm just saying you have the option, right? And so what it eliminates is this need for the CSM to write that down in a notebook at the end of the day when they have their admin block, right? Where it's like follow up on all of the calls, then they have to remember what they said, remember who said it, remember who the contact was, remember to Slack the account manager. Just do it live when you're on the call, right? One other version, imagine you're like a product-based growth model. So we're trying to attach different product lines. A very sophisticated version of this might look like using this concept tracker, or excuse me, this concept Kelly mentioned called trackers. You have trackers set up for all your product lines, right? And you can essentially use our tool in combination with your tools like Looker or Snowflake or whatever you use to have dashboards where you can see in all of your accounts, who's either mentioning this product line or who is mentioning the main pain point that this product line solves for in a dashboard view, and you can just easily see your white space, right? And you can pass that white space along to someone in marketing, to someone in your business development, or to action on, right? So one of those is very straightforward. One of them is a bit more sophisticated, but you get the idea on how you can leverage your existing customer base, apply conversation intelligence on top of it, and use it to retain and grow your business.
Nice. I love that it's such like real time, because it really doesn't allow for that like interim like stall time of like following up or moving things forward, and kind of it's always like being one step ahead of everything, is kind of what I'm hearing from both of you. And Kelly, I wanted to kind of wrap this up. We've talked, both you and Elise have talked a lot about how conversation intelligence sort of fits into multiple parts of the sales and post-sales cycle. So do you have any perspective on, you know, where you see it utilized the most versus maybe utilized the least?
I think utilized the most is definitely during those early conversations around discovery. Also during demos, I think the ability to create moments from the call, what we call snippets, and send those to people that weren't part of the conversation. That's a practice that we do a lot, being able to do the demo for certain people. They share it with stakeholders, other people that are going to need eyes on it without us having to meet again. That's where we use, that's probably where CI is used the most. I think I wouldn't say it's the least, but just where we have the most room, I think, for opportunity is in that pre to post sale handoff, where, you know, when Elise's team comes in, there's in other organizations that don't use this type of technology, there's a little bit of that rediscovery phase of, oh, why did you partner with us? What are you looking to get out of this? What's your success criteria? Those are all things that we've already discussed. If we've done our job right in that pre-sales motion. So creating snippets of that you can directly just hand off to the CSM. So when they come to that initial kickoff call, they can say, hey, I know you met with Kelly. You talked about XYZ. These are your pain points. This is what you're hoping to accomplish. It makes that sales cycle just so much more cohesive. I think that there's a big opportunity there just to leverage that entire pre-sale cycle, especially you mentioned that, you know, those sales cycles are getting longer. And if you're speaking to a company for 6, 9, 12 months, making that transition as easy as possible without having to do any of that rediscovery is really where this type of technology can help benefit both teams.
Awesome. Elise, any parting thoughts off of Kelly's points before we jump into Q&A?
I'd maybe add in terms of underutilized, I think probably I'd add product and support teams. I think it's conversation intelligence was originally brought to the market as a solution for go-to-market teams, right? So for our sales, our BDRs, our CSMs, and there's massive utility there. But I think there's also so much to be unlocked by product managers, by people who are in product marketing, even folks in the support team who are trying to build the future of the product or solve for bugs. There's people who are struggling with that right now. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a singular 30-second snippet shared between a CSM and someone on a product team clear up a confusion that has been lingering for weeks about what the real issue is right now, what the real problem is. Hearing it in the voice of the customer in a 30-second snippet, it's just like, oh, okay, so that's the problem. This is what we're trying to solve for. It's an unlock, and I'd love to see more collaboration between go-to-market teams and product teams using conversation intelligence.
Awesome. Who knows what the future holds? I'm sure it'll continue to evolve. But we are ready for our Q&A portion of today's presentation. We did get a couple that came through, so I want to make sure we did have time to cover off on those. So someone in the audience asked, can conversation intelligence provide insights into customer sentiment and emotions during those calls and those interactions? Do you, Kelly or Elise, have any thoughts on that?
It's a great question. It's one of my favorite questions for people to ask about any AI tool. I'll answer probably in two ways. The first is that no doubt, as an industry, as like a, outside of conversation intelligence, anyone who works in AI, I imagine in 10 years, sentiment analysis is going to be common, right? Just as much as we thought no one could do generative AI, and now everyone's doing generative AI, right? So we'll get there. I think right now, sentiment analysis, and any company who's saying they can do sentiment analysis should spark a bit, of skepticism in anyone. I think what's easy to do is know what are generally positive and negative words, right? Like, that was a great demo. That's so awesome. I can't wait to buy. That's an easy thing to read as a positive sentiment and a buying signal. But I think things like body language or facial expressions or those subtle lean ins and lean outs and the are very difficult to do. I mean, humans can't even do that well, right? Like, everyone's been in a situation where you thought you read the room right on how someone was feeling and you totally didn't. So I think that's a really challenging problem to solve for, and I'm sure we will get there. I'd operate with skepticism of anyone saying they can do that today. Also, I should just say, unhappy people buy software all the time. Skeptical people buy software all the time. People who seem so into it on the call don't always buy software. So it's a thing I have some skepticism about. But I love the question, and I can't wait for the world where we have it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We have time for just this last question here. Someone asked, who should be involved in the purchasing decision for conversation intelligence? So I think both Kelly and Elise, you've touched on sort of your roles and your orgs. Is there anyone outside of that? Kelly, did you have any thoughts around that one?
I think some of the typical personas that we meet with are your typical sales leaders. I think account management is another org that we haven't talked a lot about. I think it's a lot of in tandem of what Elise's organization does, but we speak with leaders who oversee like the account management side as opposed to the pre-sales side, as well as revenue enablement. I think there's a big use case that we didn't touch on a ton here today around the use of playlists. Think of those like libraries when you're looking to reduce the ramp time for your team or wanting to roll out maybe a new sales methodology. A lot of that falls under the responsibility of a sales or revenue enablement person. So that's a lot of the time some of the personas that we'll be speaking with on top of your typical, CROs, VPs of sales, head of CS, account management, but revenue enablement and even business development as well. So for the pre-sales, you have your SDRs and BDRs helping set up that initial conversation. Those are also personas that we'll work with as well.
Cool. I can also, because I'm from the marketing world, I can also potentially see there being this ability for the marketing team to see like what message they're putting in their go-to-market strategies towards these prospects, and then seeing how the sales conversations are going, or maybe the prospect is bringing up certain keywords from the messaging that's being put to market, and then the sales team and the way it all flows together in the tech stack can like float. That can be like a nice feedback loop between marketing and sales as well, which I know that's a hot topic in the world today, is that sales and marketing alignment, that go-to-market strategy there. So that's something I see from a marketer's perspective. So I love that you guys, we all have like these varying like bits and pieces of where we see conversation intelligence. I wanted to go ahead and, someone just posted a question. Oh, looks like Jesse, one of our product managers, is answering that for you, Ryan. I did want to be conscious of everyone's time. We are almost at the top of the hour, and those were all the questions that have come through. So I, again, wanted to just give a big thank you to today's audience for joining us. Big thank you to Kelly and Elise for sharing their perspectives and tactics and tips around how to go about adopting conversation intelligence, making sure it's a successful tool for your teams there. Fresh reminder as well for the audience, we did record today's presentation, so we will be following up with that on-demand recording within 2 business days, alongside some additional assets for you to dive a little deeper behind today's topic. But until the next time, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.